Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited about today's show. We've got on a recurring guest, friend of the show, Script Summit winner, filmmaker, and just one of my favorite people in general, Neil Chase. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeffrey. It's such a pleasure to be back with you.
All right, so you've got a film out on Tubi. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's called Spin the Wheel. I had the privilege of watching it. I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to just kind of get your origin story on the movie. I know you wrote it. I think you directed it too, and kind of walk me through that.
You bet. It's one of those true indie films. The entire thing we did it for, would like to say, for less than the price of a used car. There are legitimately, studio films that have a coffee budget probably bigger than what we spent on this movie. But for what we had available to us, I'm really proud of what we did. It was always meant to be a fairly small project in the sense of single location, primarily small cast, small crew, just again to keep all the costs down and to be able to say okay, what can we do in our neck of the woods, that being Edmonton, Canada. And when we filmed this, it was right on the tail end of COVID. So, as everybody remembers, there were certain restrictions in place and things like this. And, we had to play within those boundaries. And so that meant, okay, let's keep things as contained as we possibly can. And being my first feature as a co-director, because I co-directed it with my good friend, David Haycock.
Okay.
We decided early on to try to do more of a dramatic piece rather than an action oriented piece. So keeping things like, action scenes and stunts and things like this to as much of a minimum as we could, and focus more on the dialogue, focus more on the character development, the growth of each of the characters, because it's an ensemble piece, and wanted to make sure that each character had a full arc, that each character had their own chance to be in the spotlight and shine as an individual, not just like a stand-in or a cardboard cutout, which sometimes you see in a lot of films. Yeah, that's kind of it. And then as for the story itself, it's really something that it takes place more or less in real time. It's the last 90 minutes of the end of the world. So there is a cataclysmic event happening, and we sort of pick up this story where the world has known about this for about 6 hours. So everything is kind of going to hell because people are just they just found out, the powers that be kept it kind of under wraps until it was it just got leaked. And now the world knows and everything's kind of going haywire. And we have this small cast of characters who don't really have anywhere to be. They don't have any loved ones. They don't have any family or friends to be with. So they all kind of find themselves congregating in this little dive bar in the middle of this city just because they really didn't know where else to go and kind of drink the last hour and a half of the world away. And that's the genesis of the story. And then the twist is that there's a character that shows up claiming to be the devil, and he offers them a choice. They can play the game with him, which is Russian roulette, with the stakes being their souls on the one hand and the salvation of the world on the other. So if they beat him, the world is saved. If he beats them, everything goes to hell, but so do they.
I love it. And it's a contained kind of suspense, but it didn't feel low budget to me. I felt like you shot it really well. All of the audio and the special effects at the beginning and end of the movie I thought were really great.
Thank you.
And even with the story development, I'll tell you one of my favorite moments in the movie is when they watch the news and you're watching the newscaster slowly unravel. I thought that was fantastic. Or even when they end up watching a little TV episode of something that they were reminiscing about. I thought that all of that stuff was really great because it's like a movie within a movie. You had to develop all of that stuff on top of all of these other characters.
We absolutely did. Yeah, we filmed a newscast separately. Griffin Cork was the actor playing the newscaster.
Awesome. Yeah.
And yeah, we loved that. That was one of those things where we had so much material, it was really tough to pare it down,
cut it,
just for the running time. But he gave us so much wonderful material to work with. And so that was one thing we filmed. Then it was the TV show which was kind of our take on Three's Company, called Jerry's Girls.
Yeah, it's funny. It's
And then we
clever.
also did a music video that plays on the TV, which is kind of supposed to be this really cheesy pop bubblegum,
Yeah.
thing that plays on the TV. It really annoys the main character. She's like, I do not want to spend the last, little bit of my life watching this on TV. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with all those.
I mean, it's all of that world building. We have talked about
Mm-hmm.
world building before, and a lot of indie movies they'll cheat it. They'll either use, I want to say it's like under 3 seconds of a movie because you can get away with that without having to pay anything,
Right.
or you'll just hear audio. They'll cheat it, but you took it to the next level. You're like, let's just make our own stuff and go for it to really increase the immersion in the film, and I just love that.
Yeah, we wanted to make it feel real, like this is
Yeah.
a real world and has its own personality, has its own, everything. We wanted that authenticity, like you say.
So when you're in the creative stage of this thing, you're like, okay, we have so much budget, we want to do single location we can. Where does the idea of Russian roulette with the devil come from?
The first idea for this film came to me just watching disaster movies. I've always loved
Okay.
disaster films, but they all sort of have the same general format, which is you've got some hero or small group of heroes who, when the world is ending, they're tasked with stopping the end of the world and then go
Right.
off on some grand adventure, right? Usually
Mm-hmm.
globetrotting or into outer space or whatever the case may be. And the question that came to me while I was watching one of these films was, where the hell are the rest of the 99.99999% of
The
the people
normal
on the
people,
planet,
your
right? Normal
average
people.
shows.
What
Yeah,
do? We just sort of sit around and wait for these guys to
that's
save the
funny.
world. And so that was where it started. And then I asked myself the question, if the world was ending, how would I want to spend the last hour or two? And I asked some friends of mine, I asked family members, and everybody gave me the same answer. It's like, I want to spend it with my loved ones.
Right.
And so that naturally piqued my writer's brain to say, well, what if you didn't have a family? What if you couldn't be with your loved ones? You couldn't make it home in time, or you literally had nobody to be with. Without missing a beat, every single person I asked said the same thing. I would go to the nearest bar and get drunk. And
That's
I thought that
funny.
was a hilarious
That's
answer.
great research.
Yeah, so just based on that, I said, okay, well, that seals it. This is where I need to set the story then. And I wanted to set it around a group of people who quite literally have nowhere to be.
I love it. One of the most difficult characters I've had to write for the screenplay was the devil. I had a really hard time wrapping my head around pure evil. Like, what is pure evil?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to write the devil as a cliche who's just, into torture. I wanted to give the devil character and depth and
Mm-hmm.
a compelling reason for what he does. So for me, when I finally got down to it, it just really boiled down to, this is a dude who wants control in every way possible, whether it's through force or whether it's through manipulation. So when it came down to writing this devil character, did you have any struggles yourself?
Not really. I'll be honest, that character came quite naturally for some reason. That was one of the easier characters for me to write. I think it's just because I leaned in as heavily as I could into the playfulness of that
Okay.
character. To me, the character of the devil, at least in this particular movie, this is not a guy who sees himself as a villain.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a hero, and I don't think he'd ever be so brash as to call himself that. But he kind of sees himself more in that gray area, which is to say, you know what? I've been hard done by myself. And here I am giving the little guys a chance, which is more than the world does, right?
Yeah.
And more than the powers above sometimes do, maybe. So it's almost like he sees himself as a champion of the little guy because he views himself in a lot of ways as the little
Oh,
guy.
that's really interesting. I
And
like that.
then, yeah, but with that comes this idea, like you say, there is that idea of control, which is
Mm-hmm.
to say, there's that famous saying, it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. And to me,
Right.
this that exemplifies the devil, the idea that at the end of the day, he wants to come out on top no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. So he'll say whatever he has to, he'll do whatever he has to, he'll
Yeah.
promise whatever he has to, but at the end of the day, he will cut every corner, he will cross his fingers and
Yeah.
stab you in the back however he can just to get that leg up.
Exactly. So you got everything together. You shot this thing. How difficult was it when you were trying to get distribution? I mean, you got on Tubi, which is great. It's not easy to do.
Distribution was not easy. Our biggest challenge, I think, is being a true indie. There's no names attached to this film,
Right.
and that seems to be one of the things that's a big problem for indie filmmakers right now. I had a friend just recently go to the Berlin, to the film market there. It just happened a week or so ago. And one of the bits of feedback he got was they're looking for lower budget films, which is great. Anybody in the indie level is like, oh, that's fantastic. But then the second thing they want is a name that's attached,
Right.
somebody recognizable. And well, suddenly your cost just doubled, right? As an
It
indie
really
filmmaker.
does, because if you're gonna go for even like a B-list actor name, you're looking at like 30 grand
Right.
for 2, maybe 3 days of shooting.
If
And
you're
then you
lucky.
have to, if you're lucky, and then you have to shoot them in some kind of part like the, detective, that you can chop them up and
That's
fit
right.
them through the whole movie. Otherwise, you're only going to have, like 2 minutes of film.
Yes.
So yeah, and it really is true. But you're absolutely right. It doubles your budget, and if you're already scraping by to get what you have, how are we going to get Ron Perlman?
That's exactly right. And we found ourselves in that. And not to mention the fact that, like I said, we were under all these restrictions at the time. And I can't even
Yeah,
remember if travel was even allowed at that point. So even if we
right.
had somebody on, arranged, would we have even been able to fly them in here to work? I have no idea, you
Yeah,
know. So with that in mind, we really counted on the festival circuit to bring up the credibility of this film,
sure.
as well as we leaned into online reviews and reached out to a number of publications, online publications, just to say, would you be willing to take a look at at this film, and give us your honest thoughts? And that's all we've ever asked of anybody for it. And we were pleasantly surprised when, like I think the lowest review we've gotten from any online publication was 3 stars out of 5, which
Yeah,
for
that's
us is
great.
like, which is fantastic. Like I
Yeah,
couldn't
that's a
ask for
win.
any more. I would never be the person to claim, this is a 10 out of 10 movie. That's ridiculous. For me, that's the kind of film that's like Rocky. That's The Godfather. That's those level of films. This is like, I was really proud of what we did. And when we got the feedback of people saying, and this is anywhere from like a 6 out of 10 to a 7 or 8 out of 10, it's like, wow, that's great. I feel like we've kind of accomplished what we set out to do. But more than that, I was really happy to see that a lot of people that saw the film connected with it on a personal level,
That's awesome.
um, which is one of the challenges of writing a dramatic piece, first of all, but secondly, an ensemble piece. You're hoping, I think, as the writer, as the creator, that there are people who will connect with specific characters in your film, not just overall, but with, maybe see themselves in one or two of the characters. And we did get that feedback, which was really wonderful to hear.
With Spin the Wheel, you got 18 wins and 22 nominations total. I mean, that's pretty significant, and I'm excited to hear that those bumped you up into the point to where you could approach Tubi and be like, "Hey, we got this movie," and they bring it on. It's awesome.
Yeah, we actually didn't approach Tubi. It was what happened was we did in getting some of these screenings at film festivals and some of the award wins. We actually had a number of distributors approach us,
That's awesome.
and so we were in this sort of enviable situation in a lot of ways of saying, okay, we can pick and choose who we want to go with.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we went with Redwater Entertainment, who we felt was the best choice.
Yeah, they've done a lot of indie stuff. They've
They
got
have,
a, from what I can tell, from what I know, don't take
yes.
it seems like they have a decent reputation.
Yes, yes. It's run by a gentleman named Avi Fettergrain, who's a great guy. Did like I do know Avi from just personally from years past, and he's a really great guy. And we thought, okay, um, well, I think this might be a good relationship moving forward.
That's good. You got to be careful, man. There's so many predatory distributors out there
There
that will
are.
just take the money. Like, you spend so much time and money making this thing, and then you get a distributor and you're like, yes, and then the distributor never pays you. And you're like, what is happening?
That's true. I mean, there's even some that approached us that seemed like a good deal on the surface, but then you find out they want $5,000 or $10,000 up front. They want
That's
to be paid.
that's silly.
So this is how much the distribution landscape has changed. It used to be in the past, I want to say, 80s, 90s, maybe even into the early 2000s, where if your film got picked up,
You're
you would
dating us.
receive a minimum guarantee of some kind, right? So you would be
Yeah.
paid for the film. Now it's kind of flipped. It's almost the opposite, where it's like I've talked to a lot of filmmakers myself who ended up paying the distributor
Oh
up
my
front
god.
before the distributor does any work
That's
whatsoever. We don't have that relationship with in place, which is good. And there's always the thing of like your distributor is going to do work for you. He's gonna market the film, sell it, get it ready for the various streamers and
I
platforms and
don't know,
things like
man. I
that.
mean, that to me that sounds like I'm paying you to write a screenplay for me to write a screenplay. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. It's the
Yeah,
same with book publishing. I self-published because the publishers I was getting was asking me to pay them to publish the book, and I was like, "We're good. I'll just do the extra work." Like
right.
it's madness, but that is, like my wife says, end stage capitalism, ladies and gentlemen, rearing his ugly head.
It kind of is. Yeah. I think the industry is going through a transitional phase right now, personally, from what I can see.
Absolutely.
And where it comes out on the other end, I'm not sure. But I think if we're lucky, if the stars align, we'll see more of a return to theatrical, where there's an emphasis on more indie films and more low budget films. I think that's the way
God, I hope
forward.
so. I've got a film on Tubi myself, and
Mhm.
I've got another one I'm writing that they're going to film, and my producer has a deal with Tubi, so they're like, "What do you got? Send it to us. We'll look at it." And from what he's told me, Tubi is down with indie films,
Mhm.
which I'm excited about. What I
Absolutely.
get worried about was Amazon used to be the hub for
Right.
indie films, right? And then they started producing, then they started their in-house studio, then they started making their own stuff, and then they just started dropping indie films left and right. So my worry is that's going to be Tubi, right? Tubi's this
Right.
right now. It's the hub for indie films. They're taking good indie films, they're getting them on there. Then I'm like, okay, are they going to start doing their own stuff and to where they don't want our films anymore? From what I understand, the current CEO is not interested in that. They are happy doing the indie film. So hopefully it stays like that, and then we can just keep having stuff out there for people to watch. It feels so good to tell someone I have a film on Tubi. Like when you say that, you feel like, man, I've made it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling to know that people all over North America can just watch your film at the click of a
Yeah,
button,
for free, dude.
for free.
It costs them what?
Nothing.
5 minutes, two,
Yeah.
3 minutes of commercials,
That's right.
and they
That's
can
right.
watch your film. Yeah, it's pretty great.
To your point, though,
Go
to your
ahead.
point, I just want to add really quickly. I think the one thing to keep in mind is, regardless of whether or not Tubi, keeps with the indie model, and I certainly hope they do,
Yeah,
the onus is still on us as the creators to try to make as good of a product as possible, right? So
absolutely.
that the quality of the films that they present or are presented with are still high enough.
I agree with you. You said, we're in a transition right now with the industry. We absolutely are. The industry has been overcrowded
Hmm.
for a few years now. And so now you're starting to see consolidation, and it's scary. Nobody wants to see anybody out of work. And that's what's happening. So, where are we at the end of this? I have no idea. Is it going to be Blade Runner, where there's just one or two screenwriting and filmmaking corporations out there that gobbles everybody up? I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But you're right. We are absolutely in a transition. So you and I met at Script Summit quite a few years ago. I
Hmm.
am I am so glad that we have kept in touch over the years. It's just nice to have that rapport that you met at somebody at a random festival. And Script Summit 2025 is open now. So if
Hmm.
people are out there, you can go on scriptsummit.com and enter the contest. Neil, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, first of all, I would say to anybody thinking of entering Script Summit, absolutely do it, because it is one of the
Thank you.
best screenplay competitions out there. And I think in general, it's a good idea for writers to do this. Take a chance on your work. put it out there into the world. Let some stranger look at it objectively. And the nice thing about a competition like yours, Jeffrey, is that you have folks as part of your staff who they are writers themselves, so they know
Mm-hmm.
scripts, they know what to look for. They're
Yep.
filmmakers as well, so they can evaluate it in a much more objective way than your mom or your friends will do it. Every time I give my script to my mom, she says it's the best thing she's ever read, which
That's
makes me feel
funny.
really, really good inside. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, now I need to give this to somebody who can tear
That's
it apart a
great.
little bit. Yeah, so that's the one thing. The other thing I would love to say is I hope everybody checks out our film, and we're also in the post production right now for our next feature, which we shot last summer, called Contamination, which is a
Oh,
very big departure from what we did with Spin the Wheel. Spin
that's
the Wheel
awesome.
was a dialogue driven dramatic thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Contamination is wall to wall action. It's
Oh, wow.
action, it's military, sci fi, horror, all of these things tied together.
Well, I can't
And
wait to see it.
it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's we do some things here that it's funny. Our budget really isn't that much bigger than what we had for Spin the Wheel, and yet we did so much more. I'm still kind of stunned at
That's cool.
what we managed to pull off with this. So I'm really looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I can't wait to watch it. We'll check it out. Maybe I'll have you back on the show.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Take it easy.
You too.